Let me read you now a little piece I wrote in a book of mine called This Book Needs No Title. It's a very short thing. It's called A Remark on Spontaneity. I have been told by learned sources that when a truly great musician plays, and his playing sounds so free and spontaneous that the listener has no idea of the amount of non-spontaneous work, study, scholarship, analysis, and planning required to achieve these spontaneous effects. I shall not argue the point. I only wish to say that if it is true, it leads me to the amazing realization that spontaneity does not come by itself. Now a ramble through the Austrian Alps, specifically in a place called Wigeljog. The musical background, another prelude and fugue from the Welthaber Clavier from Book 2. Next, I want to read you a few more selections from my book. This book needs no title. Here's a little piece called Should One Worry? If one worries a lot, one is obviously unhappy, since worry itself is one of the most painful things in life. If one fails to worry enough, then, at least so I've been told, one may be even worse off, because one may fail to take the precautions necessary to ward off even greater catastrophes than worry. Who is really better off? The happy-go-lucky, who enjoys himself from day to day and lets tomorrow take care of itself? Or the worrying prudential person, who takes all conceivable precautions for the future, but is always worrying that he is not taking enough precautions? All my life, people have told me that my main trouble is I do not worry enough. And I must admit, this thought has always worried me. Another piece, The Man Who Did Not Want to Be Envied. Once upon a time, there was a man who could not stand being envied. He was a very creative individual and was a professor at one of the world's most prestigious universities. All his colleagues outside his university envied him his position. This he could not stand. So he gave up his position and deliberately chose a teaching position at a fifth-rate university. Still his creative work persisted, and he published. Everyone envied him for the marvelous quality of his work and also for his marvelous modesty and not seeking a more prestigious position. So he decided to publish anonymously. This did not fool anybody. Nobody but he could write the way he wrote. So he then decided that he would continue his writing, but not publish any more in his lifetime. He would arrange that all his work should be published after his death. If people should envy him posthumously, how would that hurt him? Thus years went by, and he did not publish. So he got fired. The fifth-rate university said, "You see, we want our professors to publish. We want them to amount to something." When he reminded them of his past publications, they said, "Yes, but what have you done for us recently?" Actually, the man did not very much mind being fired. It fitted in quite well with his present way of life. So he took his savings, which were quite large, since he had always lived very frugally, retired to the country where he found an incredibly beautiful spot, and with his own hands built a small but absolutely gorgeous house. The spot he had chosen was by far the most beautiful for miles and miles and miles around. Everyone who passed it turned green with envy. Indeed, sometimes he could not tell whether he was looking at an envious spectator or a tree. All this, of course, he could not stand. So he sold all his worldly possessions and gave every cent to the poor. Then he ended life as a wandering mendicant. For the first time in his life he was free from being envied. For the first time in his life he was truly happy. Until one day, years later, he met an old colleague from his prestigious university. After they had lunched and chatted together, the colleague said, "How radiantly happy you look! Good God, how I envy you!" Here's a short little one called Happiness. Jim, are you happy at this very moment? John, in one way, yes, and another way, no. Jim, can you be more explicit? John, yes. I've just heard the first really convincing argument for the immortality of the soul. Now I know for sure that I will survive my bodily death. This makes me very happy. On the other hand, my steak is overdone. The last one I will read you is called I Told You So. The following conversation occurred while I was driving with some close friends, including one man, call him B, and a girl, call her M. I had recently been discussing with B the question of an afterlife. He believed it to be a sheer superstition. On the other hand, M tends to believe in some form of afterlife on the grounds shared by Goethe that a person's own non-existence is inconceivable to one, and that it's impossible for one to believe in something he cannot even conceive. The conversation went as follows. I opened by saying, "Would you like to know the real reason I hope there is an afterlife?" B replied, "Yes." I said, "So I can triumphantly say to all my skeptical friends, I told you so." This got a general laugh. Then B said, "But wouldn't it be funny if you were the only one to survive? Then you would have no one around to gloat over." This, of course, got another laugh. Then M said, "It would be interesting if just those who believed in survival survived, and those who didn't, didn't." I thought about this and fantasized myself surviving with all the other believers and being totally frustrated and not being able to gloat over any non-believers, since they would all have gone out of existence. So I would be foiled again. Finally, I said, "I think it would be still funnier if the reverse were true. If the skeptics were the only ones to survive." I can then imagine all the skeptics together saying, "Poor Raymond. Too bad he is not with us, gloating and telling us, 'I told you so.' He sure did tell us so. If he hadn't, he would be here with us now." Here is another short and related one from my book, The Tao is Silent. And by the way, I love the photograph my wife took on the back of the jacket cover. My wife actually took this picture with my dogs. This is called A Mondo on Immortality. Zen student. So, Master, is the soul immortal or not? Do we survive our bodily death, or do we get annihilated? Do we really reincarnate? Is our soul split up into component parts which get recycled? Or do we as a single unit enter the body of a biological organism? And do we retain our memories or not? Or is the doctrine of reincarnation false? Is perhaps the Christian notion of survival more correct? And if so, do we get bodily resurrected, or does our soul enter a purely Platonic spiritual realm? Zen Master, your breakfast is getting cold.